You've heard of Zen Koans. What is the sound of one hand clapping? They are riddles, not to be answered but to be lived, designed not to resolve but to dissolve the mind, the self, the illusion of separation. But what if your brain itself is already holding a koan, not spoken, not taught, but embedded in your neural code? A riddle that pulses in the spaces between your thoughts, that whispers not in language, but in gaps, in silence. This is the mystery at the heart of the mind, not what it knows, but what it cannot know, and yet, somehow, is. Modern neuroscience maps the brain in pixels and pulses. Cognition, attention, memory, default mode networks. But no scan can capture the moment when thinking ends and awareness remains. No MRI can trace the edge of the self, where the observer disappears and only observation exists. This edge is the void, not emptiness, but potential, a field of pure awareness, untouched by memory, identity, or form. And the koan of the brain is this: if the mind is what thinks, what watches the mind? You see, your thoughts are like waves on a screen, electrochemical storms flickering across the cortex. But awareness, it is not in the waves, it is the screen itself. And every now and then, if you sit long enough, if you listen deeply enough, a strange thing happens. You become aware of your awareness. You watch the watcher, and for a brief, infinite moment, the brain becomes silent, not quiet, still. In that stillness, something ancient stirs. Not a thought, not an answer, but a question so deep it erases the questioner. Who is having this experience? Not I am, not the brain is, just presence. This moment is the meeting point, the neural koan, the boundary between mind and mystery. And though language will try to chase it, though belief will try to cage it, it slips away. Because truth isn't caught, it's encountered. And this encounter doesn't happen in study or dogma or repetition. It happens in disappearance. When the seeker stops seeking, when the question burns too bright for words, then the answer arrives, not as concept, but as void, not nothingness, but everything before it becomes something. Some say the brain is a machine, a pattern generator, billions of neurons firing in deterministic loops, crafting the illusion of self, soul, consciousness. And yet, there are moments, fleeting, fragile, when the machine hesitates, when it pauses between thoughts, and in that pause, something other emerges, not mechanical, not logical, but numinous. In deep meditation, advanced fMRI scans show that the brain's default mode network, DMN, the very circuitry that gives rise to the sense of I, begins to go dark. That network, the one that loops our stories, our timelines, our worries, our identities, it dissolves. And what's left? A field of presence, awareness without narration. In Zen, they call this Satori. In mysticism, the cloud of unknowing. In neuroscience, it's harder to name, because data does not measure the sacred, but the mystics don't need data. They've walked this path for centuries, mapping consciousness not with electrodes, but with experience. They knew that between the synapses, between the stimuli and the response, there lies a hidden gate. A gate that opens not through thought, but through surrender. And this surrender isn't passive, it's total. You don't lose control, you lose the illusion that you ever had it. When the ego steps aside, even for a breath, the brain reveals what it normally hides: stillness. The void is not a black hole. It's not lifeless. It's alive, overflowing with presence. A fullness that feels like emptiness because it contains no boundary. And your brain, this complex, spongy organ we call ours, is not the source of this presence. It's the mirror, the translator. Like a tuning fork, it can either vibrate with noise or resonate with the silent music of the infinite. But only if you listen. This is where ancient spiritual practice and cutting-edge neuroscience intersect. Both agree there is something beyond narrative, beyond language, a dimension of mind where self dissolves and only being remains. The mystic experiences it in trance, the meditator in breath, the monk in stillness. And you've glimpsed it too, in the pause between thoughts, in the awe of a sunset, in the deep inhale before a leap, in the silence after heartbreak. That space, that is where the koan lives, and every time you meet it, the brain stops being a processor and becomes a portal. Thought is clever. It creates timelines, memories, names, and goals. It constructs the I that you believe you are. But what if that I is just a mirage? What if the constant narrative in your mind is just a shell? Because when thought ceases, truly ceases, what remains is not death. It's awakening. Neuroscientists have tried to map consciousness. They find regions for language, emotion, vision, even self-reflection. But they cannot find the observer, because the observer is not in the brain. It uses the brain. It watches the thoughts the same way you watch clouds pass. You are not the cloud, you are the sky. This is the hidden message behind the neural koan, not a riddle to solve, but a veil to see through. When you chase thoughts, you are in the labyrinth. But when you become still, you realize the labyrinth was never real. The ego screams, "I am thinking, therefore I am." But awareness whispers, "I see the thought. I am before it." And that whisper, that's the gateway. Let's get more scientific. Studies on long-term meditators show that during deep absorption states, the posterior cingulate cortex, a core hub of egoic activity, goes silent. They stop narrating their life. They don't think, "I am meditating." They just are. And in that moment of non-doing, the brain no longer grasps. It opens. It becomes a window. And through that window, the infinite doesn't appear. It's revealed. Not through complexity, through simplicity. This is the irony. The closer you get to the void, the less there is to hold on to. And that's why so many avoid it. Because in the void, you don't find safety. You find truth, unfiltered, untamed, unbearably free. And yet, it's the home your soul never forgot. So, how do you return? Not by thinking harder, but by stopping, by watching thought until it loses power, by entering the breath, not as a technique, but as a door. And when you walk through, you don't disappear, you reappear, more real than ever. And the koan is no longer a question. It's a frequency, one that calls out in stillness. You are not who you think you are. And if that whisper echoes inside you, if you feel the void calling, not as fear but as familiarity, then this channel is your companion in the dark. Subscribe, tap the bell, not to follow, but to remember. Modern science sees the brain as a product of evolution, a survival machine built to solve problems, avoid threats, and seek reward. And yet, buried in every culture, every tradition, every temple etched into stone, there lies a contradiction. Mystics, saints, sages all speak of one thing: silence, stillness, not as emptiness, but as arrival. Why would a brain built to survive in chaos long for the void? Because the void isn't absence. its origin. And deep within the folds of our neural circuits is an ancient memory, a pull toward the sacred quiet that birthed all form. Ancient mystics knew this. The Upanishads described the Akasha, the subtle ether from which sound, thought, and matter emerge. Taoist sages spoke of the Tao, the nameless, the formless, the way. Mystic Christians called it the cloud of unknowing. Buddhists spoke of sunyata, emptiness that is not nihilism, but pure potential. And what's remarkable, the deeper neuroscience goes, the more it begins to echo these truths. Modern brain imaging shows that when experienced meditators reach profound absorption states, brain activity doesn't become more complex, it simplifies. The brain doesn't light up, it quiets down. It returns, not to instinct, but to essence. And in that simplicity lies the truth. The brain wasn't made just to think. It was made to know silence, because it is in silence that the most ancient part of us wakes, not the primitive, but the primordial, the unconditioned awareness behind the conditioning. The witness before memory, the presence before name. This is why all mystical systems include disciplines to quiet the mind. Breath control, sound chanting, mandala gazing, fasting, darkness retreats. Because only when the noise fades can the signal emerge. And what is that signal? Not data, not doctrine, but a feeling, a knowing, a resonance. The void isn't out there, it's beneath the surface, beneath your language, your emotions, your neurons. And it doesn't speak in words, it waits until your seeking exhausts itself, and you sit, open, not asking, not grasping. And in that moment, the Koan answers itself, not by solving, but by dissolving. What if the brain is not a generator of consciousness, but a receiver, a biological antenna tuned to subtle frequencies? This idea, once fringe, now gaining scientific intrigue, suggests something radical, that your thoughts are not entirely yours, that beneath the chatter of the mind lies a universal field, and the brain is just a translator. Quantum physics already hints at this. The vacuum, once thought empty, is teeming with zero-point energy, fluctuations of pure potential. What if consciousness is not located in the body, but woven into the fabric of space-time? What if awareness is a field, and your brain, your neural web, is simply how you tune in? This aligns with what mystics have always known. The yogi, deep in meditation, doesn't just go inward, they go beyond, into a place where identity dissolves and awareness becomes universal. In Kabbalah, they speak of the Ein Sof, pure infinite light, beyond creation. In Sufism, Fana, the annihilation of the self in divine unity. And in modern mystical neuroscience, there's a growing recognition that the mind is not confined to the skull. Extended consciousness, non-local memory, experiments in entanglement, intention, and awareness suggest something once unthinkable, that the brain, while essential, is not the source, it is the tuner. And just like a radio must be silent to hear the right station, your mind must grow still to perceive the deeper signal. That signal isn't words, it's not images, it's frequency, resonance, knowing that bypasses intellect and becomes reality. This is why silence isn't passive, it's active alignment. Each breath becomes a calibration. Each pause is not empty, it is full of tuning. And the Koan, it isn't just philosophical, it's vibrational. The question, who am I, isn't meant to be answered. It's meant to collapse the false self until the signal breaks through. And in that moment, you don't become something new. You remember something ancient. You are not your story. You are not your thoughts. You are the field. And the brain, just your doorway, your antenna, your sacred tuning fork in the symphony of the infinite. You've glimpsed the silence, You've heard the whisper behind the noise. But now comes the real challenge. How do you live it? How do you carry the void into a world of notifications, deadlines, and desires? The mystics were not escapists. They did not vanish into caves and never return. They brought the silence back. They walked through marketplaces, sat with kings and beggars, all while carrying a deep stillness inside, a kind of invisible clarity. Because once the koan has dissolved you, reality becomes different, not simpler, more alive. You don't stop thinking. You stop believing every thought. You don't abandon the self. You stop identifying with the mask. You return to the same world. But now, you see the pattern. The illusion isn't gone, but it's no longer a prison. It's art. The ego becomes not a jailer, but a character. And you are the screen, the witness, the spaciousness behind the scene. Daily life becomes a practice, not of escape, but of presence. You begin to observe rather than react. You breathe before you speak. You listen to what isn't being said, and in every interaction you sense the hum of the field, the quiet thread connecting all things. You start to live the koan, not as a riddle, as a rhythm. The brain, once overwhelmed by chaos, begins to soften. It no longer grasps for meaning. It rests in awareness. Even in the noise, there is signal. Even in the tension, there is silence. Even in you, right now, there is a place untouched by time, untouched by pain, untouched by thought. And when you live from that place, something profound happens. Life becomes meditation. Every step a mantra, every breath a prayer, not to a God above, but to the void within. And this is where the mystic meets the modern mind, not by choosing one over the other, but by realizing they are not separate. The path is not to escape the brain, it's to tune it, to refine it, until the noise becomes music and the mind becomes mirror. Somewhere between your first breath and your last thought, there is a space that is not you, but more you than anything you've ever known. You don't enter it by force. You fall into it by surrender. It's not a place you go. It's where you've always been, behind the rushing current of thoughts, memories, and identities, lies still water. And when the surface calms, just for a moment, you see something strange. You were never the reflection. You were the mirror. The self you defended, the story you told, the mask you wore were all ripples. What remains is silence, not the absence of life, but life beyond narration. And in that silence, the brain does not stop. It becomes transparent. Thoughts may still come, but they pass through. You see anger rise and let it go. You watch joy appear and let it bloom. You witness pain, but do not become it. This is the final function of the neural koan, not to give you an answer, but to remove the one asking. Because when the questioner disappears, only awareness remains. And in that awareness you see, the void is not empty. It's sacred, and you are made of it. Not as metaphor, but literally. Every atom in your body emerged from stars that died billions of years ago. You are stardust, shaped into flesh, looking back at the cosmos with eyes made of its own light. And now it's your turn to ask, not who am I, but who is asking? So tell me, traveler of silence and signal, when thought ends, who watches the end? Drop your answer in the comments. Your voice may be the echo someone else needs to remember their own. And when you're ready, explore the other awakenings on this channel. Because the koan isn't solved in one sitting, it unfolds, one silence at a time.